No matter how many wonderful stories and fruits of Medjugorje are displayed in evidence over the past 40 plus years of the reported apparitions, people still hold on to misinformed, outdated misinformation. I did a video a few months ago this year with the Friends of the Visionaries and Vucic, who's also now producer of the upcoming movie regarding the fruits of Medjugorje. I managed to have 1 hour and a half of our time. The full video will be in the cards above and the description below, and it will be recommended at the end of this short excerpt from that full interview. I've recently seen more comments on the channel. I've seen great Orthodox priests on great Orthodox platforms on YouTube and other social media platforms still put out the message within their presentations of other things that Medjugorje is still one of the greatest deceptions of our time, that it's false, that the bishop who has authority of the diocese has condemned it. But that is outdated misinformation, and this excerpt from Anne will put that record straight. Feel free to watch the full video, which will be recommended in the cards section and the video description below. And once you see the truth of it all, please hit the subscribe button and be notified further of upcoming videos. Thumbs up, subscribe, bell icon, and here is the truth.
One of the most common objections that you hear about Medjugorje is that, I've heard so many people saying this, is that it has been condemned by the local bishop, and so end of story. There's nothing more to say. He's condemned it, right? So let me set the record straight here. So since Medjugorje began, there have been 3 bishops who have overseen the Diocese of Mostad. Medjugorje is within the Diocese of Mostad today. And 3 bishops have been in place in the Diocese of Mostad since the apparitions began. The first 2 bishops have been very much against the apparitions, have publicly stated they are not authentic, have publicly condemned them. And it is for that reason that people go, well, the bishops condemned it, end of story. But here's the part that they don't know, or that they conveniently ignore. So the first bishop, when he formed a commission in, I think in 1983 or 4, I can't remember, very early on, he formed a commission to investigate Medjugorje. I actually ended in like the late 80s, I actually ended up meeting one of the members of that commission in Chicago. He was in Chicago on some business or whatever. I ended up meeting him, and he actually told me that he was brought into that commission because he didn't believe in Medjugorje. And he said that that first bishop actually specifically chose people who he knew were against Medjugorje and brought them into the commission because he wanted the conclusion of the commission to be that Medjugorje is not authentic. He got that conclusion. At the end of the investigation, the commission said Medjugorje is not authentic and should be condemned. But what happened? That the story doesn't end there. That's just the beginning of the story. The story does not end there, because something really incredible happened. At the time when the bishop, Bishop Havojanic was his name, he submitted those findings to the Vatican. And at the time, Cardinal Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith at the time. And those findings went to his commission. Well, Cardinal Ratzinger rejected those findings. So he basically symbolically kind of like tore up the paper, symbolically speaking, rejected the negative findings of that commission. And not only rejected the findings of that commission, he did 2 other things. He formed a new commission to investigate Medjugorje, and that new commission consisted of the bishops of the former Yugoslavia. It was still Yugoslavia at the time. It hadn't fallen apart yet. So the new commission consisted of the bishops of the former Yugoslavia. But the second thing that he did, which I find even more interesting, he stripped the local bishop who came up with this negative finding of any authority to make a definitive ruling about the apparitions in Medjugorje. And not only stripped him of that authority, but of all of his successors. So the fact that the local bishop said that Medjugorje is not authentic, that's fine, he can say that. It's no more binding on the faithful than my bishop in Chicago or your bishop in the UK where you live saying, well, Medjugorje is not authentic. Well, that's fine. He can have that belief, but that belief is not binding on the faithful. In the same way, even though Medjugorje is in the Mostar diocese, the authority to make those kinds of rulings about Medjugorje was taken away from the local bishop and his successors. So when people say that the local bishop is against it, yes, the first two were. The third one now, that's a different story. Yes, the first two were, but there's this whole rest of the story that Cardinal Ratzinger rejected those findings, formed a new commission, took the authority away from the local bishop to make any kind of definitive rulings on Medjugorje. And that new commission issued a statement. It's called in 1991, it's called the Zadar Declaration. Zadar is a town on the Croatian coast, the coast of Croatia. And it's called the Zadar Declaration because the commission meeting happened in the town of Zadar in 1991, hence the name, the 1991 Zadar Declaration. The Zadar Declaration, which was the body in the church that had the ability to make an authoritative ruling on the church. This is all kind of part of church protocol. There were three decisions that they could have reached. One was that we are sure this is not of supernatural origin. The second was we are sure that this is supernatural origin. And the third was we don't yet know. And so the 1991 Zadar Declaration took that third option. We do not yet know. They didn't say this is authentic, and they didn't say this is not authentic. They said we do not yet know, and we need to continue watching and monitoring. In addition to that, they said that pilgrims are allowed to go there, and priests are allowed to accompany pilgrims for their spiritual needs. What happened recently, which is so exciting for those of us who love Medjugorje and follow Medjugorje. In 2010, Pope Benedict established. So in late 1980 or in the late 80s, he basically saved Medjugorje because he stopped the negative finding of the local bishop, right? Well, in 2010, he established a new commission to investigate Medjugorje, and that commission did its work from 2010 to 2014. And that commission only investigated, they divided the apparitions into, at least for now, two parts. The first 7 days and the rest of the apparitions. They might go back and divide it further later on, I don't know. But I know that directly from Ivan, who told me that when he was called to give testimony at the commission, he was only ever asked about the first 7 days of the apparitions. So that 2010 commission investigated the first 7 days of the apparitions. And interestingly enough, there were, I think, 19 or 20 members of that commission. Guess who was not invited to be a part of that commission? And that is the local bishop of the Diocese of Mostar, in whose territory Medjugorje lies, right? He was not invited to be a part of that commission. The commission found, the commission recommended that the first 7 days be approved. That doesn't mean that they are approved. That was just their recommendation. So a lot of people actually incorrectly think that the first 7 days of the apparitions are approved. They're actually not yet approved. The commission recommended that they be approved, and we're waiting on Pope Francis to take action based on that recommendation. But the other thing that happened, which was so exciting, that the Vatican assigned in 2018, I think it was, a position which is called an apostolic visitor. So a bishop assigned directly to Medjugorje, who oversees the spiritual needs of the pilgrims in Medjugorje. That first bishop was Archbishop Henryk Hoser, who was the retired Archbishop of Warsaw, Poland. Unfortunately, he died about a year and a half ago. And so the new apostolic visitor to the parish of Medjugorje is Archbishop Aldo Cavalli, who is a lovely, lovely man. Had the opportunity to meet him 6 months ago. And it's so exciting to have a local bishop assigned just to Medjugorje, which effectively puts Medjugorje directly under Vatican control. And one other thing, I know this has been a long-winded comment of mine, but one of the
we need to hear.
and this is the stuff that, I think this is the stuff that's important for people to know. The last little bit that I want to share is about that subject, kind of Medjugorje in the church, is that in 2018, I think it was on Mother's Day in the United States, the Vatican, I had mentioned that there was a ban on officially organized pilgrimages to Medjugorje. lay people could organize groups, but official pilgrimages were not allowed. Well, in 2018, on Mother's Day, that ban was lifted, and any Catholic organization can now organize pilgrimages to Medjugorje. So the long-winded answer to the question of, to that objection that the local bishop is against it, which so many people still say, is that's history. That's no longer the case. That's an irrelevant piece of information because that's just not the status as it is. Everything that's happened in the last couple of years in Medjugorje points to the fact that the church, the Vatican, is very much supportive of what's happened in Medjugorje. I mean, the last couple of youth festivals, Pope Francis sent a message to the young people there. I mean, how much more positive can you be about the apparitions in Medjugorje? So it's a wonderful time to be somebody who follows these events.